Alright guys, welcome back. This is chapter 8. Here is our funny internet picture of the day. You gotta love Yoda. He's one of my favorites. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Big Star Wars fan. Anyway, today we are talking about child porn. And child porn is one of the most difficult emotional subjects that cybercrime and the entire field has to deal with. It is a very difficult to discuss thing. It is absolutely horrible, and a lot of people get very upset by it. I'm going to do my best to be understanding of that, but keep in mind that this is a very difficult subject to hear about. It's very difficult for me to teach about it. But it is important, I think, that people understand the subject because it is so damaging and so harmful and such a big deal. And I am a firm believer that education is one of the ways we can fix society's problems, not just this, but in other areas as well. So, on to the actual course. Child porn has only been illegal in the United States since 1977. There was a law passed in 77 that said all pornography actors must be above the age of 18. Prior to that, porn was either legal or illegal without regard to the age of the actor or actress. Since then, we have had more laws passed concerning child porn in the United States. Most of them have been making the punishments harsher and harsher, redefining what child porn is, defining different ways we can go after it, and different methods of, discovering and prosecuting it. One of the interesting things is that there is a law in the United States that essentially says fake child porn is even illegal. Just because it's not actually real doesn't mean it's legal. So, this is designed to go after people who kind of Photoshop porn, where they will take an 18-year-old's body and put an 11-year-old or 12-year-old's face on that 18-year-old body. And then kind of sell that as child porn. And when they got arrested, they got to say, well, the nude parts of the body, the porn part of the picture, is an 18-year-old actress, thus it's not illegal. So they actually passed a law specifically making any fake or created child porn illegal. Now, that technically means that, say, animation, there's a lot of anime porn out there. There's, erotica involving children. Under that law, those things are also illegal. Now, the question is whether a prosecutor is actually going to go after those things. But they are, yes, technically, if you draw a picture of two 14-year-olds naked, that is an illegal act. The reason behind making child porn illegal is kind of two things. There's two facets to why child porn is illegal and wrong and harmful. The first is consent, right? I'm a very firm believer that when it comes to any sexual activity, consent is key. Consent is incredibly important. If you don't have the full, informed, obvious consent of the other person, that sex is wrong, hands down. And the kind of legal theory behind child porn being illegal is that children can't consent. They don't have the mental capacity to fully understand A, sex, and B, the videotaping or photographing of that sex. They don't have the ability to mentally and give informed voluntary consent. This is magnified by the fact that most people who make child porn are the child's parent or guardian or teacher or in some kind of authoritative position above the child, thus making it even harder for the child to understand that they're allowed to say no. They have the ability to say no. Thus, it is kind of legally impossible for them to be able to consent to having porn made of themselves. The other half of the equation is that child porn is fairly universally associated with both physical and emotional abuse. It's never, or almost never, a child being like, oh, I want to go have sex with a much older person. The vast majority of the time, it's a aggressive older person and a reticent or not understanding or not prepared younger person, and that results in physical abuse from, not just the sexual way, but also assaults, hits, slaps, bruises, that kind of thing, and emotional abuse. Everything from don't tell your parents because they won't believe you, to this is your fault because you didn't do the dishes, to all kinds of really horrible, permanently scarring kind of abuse. One of the famous ways that child porn, child molestation, all kinds of child sex crimes have become famous in recent years is there was a TV show called To Catch a Predator. This was a very famous TV show. I forget what channel it was on. But essentially, they would perform sting operations where an adult would pretend to be a 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever year old boy or girl on the internet. And they would allow men, and it was almost always men, although there were, I think, a few women who appeared on the show, but they would allow these men to start talking with what they believed to be an underage person, getting more sexual in nature, and then eventually the child would say, oh, why don't you come over to my house? And the man would, in the show, agree and come over, and as soon as they walked in the door, they would get confronted by the host of the show, Chris Hansen. He'd say, have a seat right there, and then he'd sit down and he'd talk with the person and say, do you think this is okay? Do you, you're here to have sex with a 14-year-old boy or something, and confront the person, and then they would leave the house and be arrested by the police, usually. This was kind of controversial because while child porn and sex with kids is nearly universally, negatively viewed by society, there is an argument that it's not okay to kind of broadcast that on national television, especially before these men have been tried and convicted of any crime. And in fact, there were a couple of instances where men who appeared on the show committed suicide because of the shame and the guilt that the television show had, or I should say their actions that were televised, brought them. But in Europe, there's a group that is trying to combat child porn. They're called Combating Pedophilia Information Networks in Europe. And they have a scale of child porn, okay? Because not all child porn is created equal. Some is worse than others. And it's all bad, but some is actually worse than others. And they created a 10-level scale where they can take any piece of child pornography and kind of rate it based on how, I don't know how else to say it, how evil it is. So I'm not going to go through all 10 of the different levels. You can Google it if you'd like. But Level 1 is normal pictures of children that are used in an inappropriate way. So a young child in shorts running through a sprinkler in their front yard. Completely normal picture that I'm sure many of the parents here have of their children. But it's normal pictures like that that can be used by essentially the bad guys in an inappropriate way. And then it gets worse and worse and worse. And when you get to level 10, it's like very sadistic, painful, the stuff that every parent has nightmares about, kind of to the maximum, really, really horrible stuff. And it actually doesn't become illegal in most places until level 4. So level 1, 2, and 3 are actually perfectly legal for people to have on their computers, or hard copies if you're an old school kind of person. But for instance, there are grandparents who have pictures of their very young grandchildren in the bath, and those kids are naked because they're taking a bath, but it's not illegal for that to happen, right? There's no sexual background, there's no sexual poses, there's no sexual connotation to the photos. They just happen to be of a nude child, and those aren't illegal. If those pictures are obtained by somebody who is a pedophile or a child porn person, they can be used for immoral purposes, but they are not really illegal unless there is some kind of sexual pose or content or some kind of sexuality to the photo itself, at least in the United States. I can't speak for other countries. Child porn is an incredibly, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it's a really easy crime to commit, and it's a very easy crime to get away with, because it's very popular, and it's very, I don't want to say very popular, it's a very small percentage of the people, both on the internet and just in the world, who consume child porn, but even a very small percentage of 7.3 billion people, or whatever we're up to now, is a huge number. So it's too common, it's too easy. There's one estimate that 20,000 child porn images a week are uploaded to the internet. And you can find child porn just by Googling. Do not do that, because while it is easy to get away with, you might be caught, and there is no excuse of, oh, I'm taking a cybercrime class and I was just looking for purposes of the class. That doesn't work. So don't even, begin to research this yourself. But there are services to be found, websites or chat rooms or forums, where they discuss where to go to find child porn. They trade images like Pokemon cards. I mean, it's I have 5 images of a 12-year-old girl, and I want to trade them for images of a 12 to 14-year-old boy. Yeah, it is disturbing how these people can use photos of this abuse and trade them and share them, and yeah, I'm going to move on. So, another issue with modern internet capabilities is live streaming child abuse. So a parent or guardian who wants to abuse their child not only will abuse the child, but they'll do it on camera. And they will have paying customers who will pay to watch them abuse that child. and they can make a lot of money because this is taboo, because it's illegal, because it's relatively rare. The men who want this are willing to pay a lot of money for it. So there are people who will take large amounts of money and do things to their children at the direction of the viewer. Just like the cam girls we talked about in the previous chapter, these people will make a lot of money doing things. So one of the places this is relatively common, again, using the term relatively, it's a very, very small percentage of the people in the world who are actually doing this, but relative to other places and times, there are relatively many people doing this in the Philippines, and it seems to be increasing. They caught 57 people doing this in 2013, and that number had risen to 167 in 2015. Now we can hope that that's just, it's not that the number of people doing it is going up, it's just the percentage of the people doing it who get caught is going up. But unfortunately, I doubt that. I would bet it's the actual prevalence of the act going up, not just the percentage of people getting caught. Because again, it is profitable. You can make a lot of money if you don't have those morals, essentially, right? If you're willing to do horrible things, you can make a lot of money. And if you want to do horrible things to yourself, knock yourself out. But when you're doing horrible things to somebody else, that is a very, very, the legal system needs to step in. Grooming is another thing that is kind of related to child porn. It's kind of a associated thing, but with grooming, essentially the bad guy will find a child, usually on social media, but sometimes it's over email or a chat room or something. They'll find a child and they'll start talking to him or her, and becoming friendly, becoming close. They'll start by asking for innocuous images of the, so send me a picture of your face, send me a picture of the clothes you're wearing today, all these things. And then it escalates. The bad guy kind of gets more and more, and it's, oh, send me a picture of you topless. Oh, send me a picture of you kissing your friend. Oh, here's a picture of me naked. What do you think? Here's a picture of somebody else your age naked, to kind of try to normalize people their age taking naked pictures. But it escalates. It gets more and more and more. And a lot of times, though not always, this grooming behavior leads to the physical, right? I mean, and that was what To Catch a Predator was about, was this grooming behavior escalating to the physical, and the bad guy actually showing up somewhere and meeting the child, whether it's in public or at their house or wherever. The dark web has been a very important tool for child porn producers, consumers, distributors. The dark web is essentially the umbrella term for any portions of the internet that are not indexed by a search engine, right? So Google, the way Google works is it sends out this bot, this robot that goes out and looks at all these different websites on the internet. It just roams the internet looking for any kind of connection, any kind of server, any kind of response. And if you run a website like, NFL.com or Facebook or whatever, you want those robots to find you and connect to you, because that allows people to Google you. But there are other purposes for which you might set up an internet site or an internet something where you don't want them to Google to index that address. For instance, if I have a security camera that's internet enabled on the front of my house, I want to be able to access that feed because I know it exists, but I don't want anybody who Googles security camera video to be able to access my security camera on my front porch. That would be a little creepy, right? So I would set that security camera to not react to Google's robot. So the vast majority of the dark web, well, the vast majority of the deep web, and these are very related weird terms, the deep web is what is not indexed by search engines. The vast majority of it is completely legitimate people and businesses and stuff that they just don't want connected to Google, like security cameras or my thermostat on my air conditioning system or whatever. It needs to be connected to the internet, but I don't want people to be able to Google it. The vast majority of it is perfectly innocuous. The dark web is the subset of the deep web that is used for things that people want to hide. This can be everything from drug sales to there's an assassination market, a famous one on the dark web, child porn, all kinds of different things can be bought, sold, viewed, traded, talked about, discussed, experienced, all those things on the dark web. And the dark web is exceptional because you can only access it using a service like Tor, T-O-R, the onion router. Essentially, this is a browser, so just like Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox or Microsoft's Internet Explorer, it is a browser that you can download and install on your computer. It's absolutely free. You can go, in fact, I would recommend you go out there and download it right now because it's an incredibly useful tool. But it automatically routes your traffic through a whole bunch of proxies. And we've talked about proxies earlier in the semester. And they're essentially ways to anonymize the source of the traffic, right? So using this Tor browser, none of the servers you connect with, none of the servers you talk to know who you are or where you are or what your IP address is or any of those things. This Tor browser automatically anonymizes your traffic through this giant network of proxy servers. And it's impossible if you use Tor. I don't want to say impossible. It's very, very, very difficult to figure out who you are. The dark web requires that you access their websites and such with Tor to protect not only you, but them. So, if one of the dark web websites gets busted by the FBI, they're going to look at all the access logs and they're not going to be able to tell who anybody was, right? So somebody was here ordering drugs from our service, but we can't tell who it was because they were using this Tor service. All, or almost all, I should say, the vast majority of monetary transactions that happen on the dark web happen with cryptocurrency. Because similar to Tor, it is very, very, very difficult to track the monetary transactions if you use a cryptocurrency. The most common cryptocurrency right now is Bitcoin. Hopefully most of you have heard of Bitcoin, but that's not the only one. There's also Ethereum and Litecoin and Dogecoin, and there's a whole bunch of different cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin just happens to be kind of the most popular, the highest valued right now. But that makes it much, much, much harder to track people who use this dark web, both through their IP address and through their money trail. So you can buy drugs, you can pay for access to kiddie porn, you can do a lot of very evil, very bad things, and it's very difficult, although not impossible, for any kind of law enforcement agency to track you or find you or figure out who you are. So that is perfect for child porn consumers, distributors, and producers to get together and create websites, not just for the child porn itself, but also to talk about it, to develop a subculture around child porn. And in fact, they've done so. There's forums and chat rooms and all these things where these men have gotten together and created this entire subculture. And like most subcultures on the internet, they do it because they face vilification in the real world. In this case, I would say rightly. You know, they can't just start talking to people about child porn at a coffee shop, right? The vast majority of the people they try that with are going to be like, you sick bastard, how dare you? But on the internet, where they know they're with people who believe like they do, they're able to find support. They're able to find people to talk to, and people who will help them rationalize their behavior, people who will help them justify consuming child porn or producing child porn, people who will make them kind of feel better or feel good, teach them about it, how to do it, how to get away with it, how to hide their collection, all these things, and they're able to form a community, a subculture, specifically surrounding these child porn images or videos or whatever. Two of the things they like to focus on in the subculture to rationalize or justify their behavior are two of the 5 techniques of neutralization. I think we've talked about that earlier in this class. If not, I talk about it in my Intro to CJ class, which is also on this YouTube channel. But Sykes and Matza in the 70s came up with these 5 techniques of neutralization, or ways that people can justify doing something that they kind of know deep down is bad, but they can justify doing it and they're not bad people. Even though they're doing this thing that they kind of know is a bad thing, using these techniques, they're able to say, yes, I did this bad thing, but I'm not a bad person because, right? And, excuse me, the 2 methods used by these child porn people the most are denial of the victim and denial of injury. Denial of the victim is essentially saying they wanted it. They asked for it. There is no victim here because they were full and willing participants. You know, the child wanted me to take naked pictures of him or her, or they wanted to have sex with me, or they wanted to participate in these activities, and thus there is no victim, there is no harm, it's okay. They're justifying their behavior by saying it was okay. And then there's denial of injury, where this is also called denial of harm, i.e. I didn't do anything bad to them. It was pleasurable for them. They enjoyed it. They, you know, I taught them how sex works, and, you know, they're able to rationalize and justify and say that the act that they did with the child, or the act that was done to the child that they have the pictures or videos of or whatever, was actually a good thing, and thus there was no injury, there was no harm to the child with any of that. So with that incredibly depressing conversation, I'm going to take a little break, but I will be back with the second half of this chapter in a few minutes. It will be instantaneous for you thanks to the miracle of recording technology, but I will see you then.